Part 78. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 771. Rong Yu was busy all day long. He was busy with his son's birthday in the morning, and he was busy inspecting the military camp in the afternoon to randomly check the training results of the soldiers in the military camp. When he returned to the palace, the sky had already darkened. The people of the Dajhan palace were preparing dinner. Rong Yu left Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao to have dinner together in the palace, and listened to Xiejin's detailed report on the situation in Mianzhou. Hao had finished class long ago and was currently playing with his younger brother in the Dajhan palace. The 11-month-old little guy had already started talking nonsense, and he didn't know whether the words that came out of his mouth were brother or giggling. In short, Hao can rarely show some warmth every time. It is very strange that the word warmth will appear on the face of a 3-year-old child. But it is. On weekdays, whether the little prince is staying with his parents, in front of the teifu, or facing anyone else, the expression on his little face is almost always cold and cold. It is difficult to see any obvious changes in emotion. When facing his younger brother, his expression will be much gentler, and occasionally you can see the raised corners of his mouth. When Nan 11 saw this scene, she couldn't help but sigh that the two brothers had a good relationship, and she sincerely hoped that this relationship could last forever and that the brothers would never see each other. Today is the little prince's birthday. Xiejin obviously forgot about this. I didn't prepare a birthday gift. Nan 11 said, birthday gifts are not important. Starting tomorrow, you will often take Hao out to experience the people's feelings. Xiejin was silent for a moment. Don't His Royal Highness still have classes? You can choose to teach when there are no classes. Nan 11 walked to the main seat of the dining table and sat down. Hao sat in his father's arms. Nan 11 held Xiao Zhana in his arms. Experiencing people's livelihood is also important. A required course. Xiejin nodded, yes. The prince has literature classes in the morning and martial arts classes in the afternoon. If he wants to take him out, the best time is in the evening. Both he and Yao Yao have time. Take him out to see all kinds of life, so that Hao understands that the country is not limited to the prosperous ones. In the imperial court, there are more sadness and helplessness, joys and sorrows. The livelihood of all kinds of people in the world is the foundation of the country and the country. After dinner in the palace, Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao resigned and returned to Jinyuan. As soon as he stepped into the courtyard, Xiejin pushed away all the servants, put his arm around Xian Yuanyao's waist and entered the door. He closed the door with his backhand and swept into the inner room like a gust of wind. Xian Yuanyao was pressed on the bed in an instant. Yao Yao. Xiejin pressed his forehead against his voice low, I want you to cry. Xian Yuanyao hugged Xiejin's shoulders tightly, closed his eyes, and was silent for a while before saying, it depends on your ability. These 4 short words sounded calm and casual, but in Xiejin's ears they undoubtedly sounded a bit provocative. The two have been getting along for so long. Xian Yuanyao naturally understands the meaning of Xiejin's words. After 7 months of separation, Xiejin is not the only one who has been tormented by longing. How can Xian Yuanyao have the time to care about being thin-skinned or not? But go take a shower first. He opened his eyes and said calmly, I sweated all over in the military camp and my body is dirty. Xiejin listened to him, okay. There is probably a kind of evil in human nature, and we can't help but want to conquer a strong and proud person. But who conquered whom seems to have already been answered. The night gradually deepened, and the quiet atmosphere lasted for a long time. Both of them were greedy for this extremely quiet and reassuring atmosphere at this time. Xiejin calmed down his breathing. In the extreme silence, a reassuring sense of satisfaction seemed to ferment from the depths of his soul. He even hoped that time could stay at this moment forever, and that he and Yao Yao would stay together until old age. Yao Yao. Xiejin reached out and hooked his hair, are you tired? Xian Yuanyao was lying on the bed, not wanting to talk, and there was still a bit of dizziness in his mind. Sometimes he really wonders, even though he is physically strong, why is he the one who feels exhausted in the end? Yao Yao Xiejin kissed the corners of his eyes, showing inexplicable pleasure in his affection. Shall we take a bath? Xian Yuanyao hummed, but did not move. He still closed his eyes as if he was about to fall asleep. The corners of Xiejin's mouth curled up, and he picked him up and got out of bed to take a shower. After placing the young man in the warm bathtub, Xiejin turned around and returned to the inner room. Instead of calling his servants to come in, he took off all the bed and bedding and replaced them with new ones. Then he turned back behind the screen and served him virtuously. Take a bath with Xian Yuanyao. I have a question. Xian Yuanyao's voice was slightly hoarse, which was invisibly touching. Is this warm water prepared? From last night to midnight, Xiejin didn't let anyone come in to change the water. So how did the water in the bathtub stay warm? He was replaced by Ming Yan. Xiejin said in a matter-of-fact tone. He is strong, fast, and neat in doing things. He went to the kitchen several times and brought hot water. Xian Yuanyao opened his eyes, frowned slightly, and looked at Xiejin for a moment. So, Ming Yan was also watching us last night? Of course not. Xiejin laughed. Where did Yao Yao go? How could he be looking at us? Xian Yuanyao was silent for a long time. You really know how to make the best use of everything. The dignified secret guard was actually responsible for helping the master carry water for bathing, and he could not make a sound. He had to do it secretly and quietly. It was really difficult for Ming Xiang to obey Xiejin's orders without any regrets. Xiejin looked at the young man's features. He was so handsome under the light, making people's hearts beat uncontrollably. Yao Yao is so beautiful. Xiejin curled his lips and smiled. She is even more charming when she cries. Xian Yuanyao's expression froze, and he stared at him expressionlessly. I really want to make Yao Yao cry every day. Xiejin stretched out his hand to draw his eyebrows. He was obviously speaking bad words in a bad tone, but at this time and in this atmosphere, he even felt angry with a hint of coquettishness. Yao Yao, do you think I'm capable? Xian Yuanyao's toes almost shrank. He stared at Xiejin's face, which was particularly annoying. His handsome face couldn't help but blush a little. He didn't know whether it was because of shame or anger. Xiejin, if you keep talking nonsense, Xiejin took his slender fingers, put them on his lips and kissed them. I'll let you win back one day, and Yao Yao can also let me beg for mercy. Xian Yuanyao's heart was instantly moved. The picture of Xiejin begging for mercy in his mind was a temptation that was hard to refuse. However, he was not in good physical condition now, and he needed time to recuperate and regain his strength before winning back another city. The longing for each other after 8 months of separation was all transformed into a hearty exercise tonight. After taking a hot bath, the two of them returned to the bed with new bedding and began to quietly talk about some things that happened after the separation. How is Xian Yuanchen doing as an official? Does he have the dignity of a parent official? Everything requires a process of getting used to. Dignity is not innate. Xiejin smiled lightly. When he needs to make decisions for the people, punish corrupt officials, and fight wits and courage with local hooligans, his dignity comes naturally. Warm Ti. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 772. Xian Yuanyao didn't say anything. Xian Yuanchen understands what his responsibilities are. He knows that after gaining the trust and respect of the regent, he needs to do something to repay such a favor. Xiejin leaned over and kissed the corner of Xian Yuanyao's eyes. He has a heart that loves the people, which is enough to be a good parent official. Xian Yuanyao pushed his face away, slowly hummed, and asked casually, where is Zone Yucheng? Xiejin smiled secretly, but his face remained calm. The young man of the Zone family has been very well behaved recently. He dared not come to me for no reason to show his courtesy. He took control of the Zone family and killed those who should be killed. He has a lot of things to do in the future, including business, interpersonal relationships, and business dealings with grain merchants. The interests involved all require him to handle them personally. This young man is also growing up slowly, so you can give him some time. Xian Yuanyao listened, and his mind couldn't help but outline the picture of the young man who was busy all the time. He secretly thought that he should be busy. Once people are busy, they have no time to think about messy things. It's not easy for anyone in this world. If you want to be in power, you have to work harder than ordinary people. Those who hold military power must have higher martial arts and deeper strategies than the soldiers, have the ability to plan and have experience in killing enemies on the battlefield. Those who hold power in the court must be smart and scheming, have a flexible mind, and be deep-minded. They must always be vigilant and have careful strategies to prevent any accidents, otherwise they will not know when they will be killed by others. Zone Yuchain wants the power of the Zone family, so he also needs enough courage and should use his mind in the right place, instead of treating himself as a beautiful puppet to please others. Thinking of this, Xian Yuanyao suddenly felt at ease and felt that Xiejin was actually reliable most of the time. A short separation is better than a new marriage. Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao are so happy that they stayed in Jinyuan for 3 consecutive days without leaving. The master gave them a half-month holiday, and the two of them went crazy day and night in Jinyuan, as if they wanted to make up for the debts they owed in the past 7 months. They slept so hard that the sky was dark and the sun and moon were dim. On the 8th day of the 3rd month, Jeanruo, who had already returned to Yu country, sent a wax-sealed secret letter. Oh no, he sent a secret letter to Xuemink. The secret letter was presented to the emperor after several rounds of circulation, which really surprised Nan 11, because Jeanruo, who had always been incompatible with Rong Yu, actually asked Rong Yu to open the secret letter himself. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows and smiled. Jeanruo has grown up all of a sudden and actually wrote a letter to you. Rong Yu held the secret letter between his fingertips and was silent for a moment. A hint of coldness appeared in the depths of his pupils, but he smiled faintly. 11 do you want to guess what is written in this letter? Nan 11 pondered and said, it should be something related to me, and it is very likely that it is not a pleasant thing. After all, with Jeanruo's temper, if it is not related to her, it is probably impossible to send a letter to Rong Yu. If it was just a normal greeting, it would be fine to hand it directly to Nan 11, and it would also be impossible for Rong Yu to open it in person. So the biggest possibility is that he knew something about Nan 11 and sent the letter to Rong Yu to solve it. Rong Yu didn't say anything, but opened the letter and read it directly. However, after seeing the content of the letter, his originally gentle expression gradually became shrouded in a layer of frost. Nan 11, who was sitting next to him, was the first to feel the rapid drop in temperature around him, which was piercingly cold. After reading the letter, Rong Yu clenched his hands, and the letter was crumpled into a ball in his hands. Ayu, don't be angry. Nan 11 had obviously anticipated that the content of the letter might make him feel bad, and kissed his face, saying softly, nothing is worth your anger. Rong Yu pursed his thin lips tightly, and a real murderous intent appeared in his eyes. If it's not a very important matter, we don't need to care about it. If it needs to be solved by force, we will solve it by force, Nan 11 said calmly. It's not worth getting angry. She doesn't like war. She hopes that Dongling will become a strong and peaceful country, and the people will always live in a stable and prosperous environment, without having to face displacement and war. But if it is really necessary to use force, she doesn't mind making those who always can't restrain their ambitions and die in various ways pay a price. Rong Yu was silent for a long time, and the gloom between his eyebrows gradually faded. He asked someone to call Chu Hongii in. Chu Hongii entered the hall and saluted. Pass on this king's order to let Xiejin, Xian Yuanyao, and Chu Nanyi enter the palace immediately. Yes. Chu Hongii quickly took the order and left. taking a few imperial guards out of the palace and went to the Xie family and the Chu family respectively. Not long after, the three people who received the order hurriedly changed their clothes and entered the palace to see the king. Nan 11 reached out and took the crumpled letter from Rong Yu's hand, unfolded it gently, and looked at the words on it carefully, and then understood. No wonder Rong Yu was furious. The letter said that there has been a rumor circulating in the imperial city of Nanjiang that whoever gets the Queen of Dongling will get the world. This rumor has been going on since Nan 11 ascended the throne. At the beginning of this spring, the ambition of the Emperor of Nanya could no longer be hidden. He urgently wanted to marry the Queen of Dongling and marry her. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 773. Nan 11 frowned. She remembered that when she was in the Great Zhou dynasty, Suchang wanted to marry the legitimate daughter of the Nan family on behalf of the king of South Vietnam. At that time, Nan 11 had already married Rong Yu and became the regent princess of the Great Zhou dynasty. So the emperor of South Vietnam has always wanted to marry her and has never given up. Nan 11 frowned slightly. Jean Rouault traveled thousands of miles to send such a secret letter. He must have predicted in advance that South Vietnam would take action. Your Majesty the Queen, Prince Regent Chu Hongii left and returned, Master Xia and Prince Yao are here. Rong Yu said coldly, let them come in. The three of them quickly entered the palace to salute. Xie Jin said, I wonder why the Lord summoned me. Nan 11 raised her hand and handed the letter in her hand to Chu Hongii. Chu Hongii glanced at it briefly, then turned around and handed it to Xie Jin and the others. The atmosphere in the Dajhan palace was a bit solemn. Xie Jin and Xian Yuanyao frowned slightly after reading the contents of the letter, and their expressions were a bit unsightly. The Emperor of South Vietnam is about to die, isn't he? Xie Jin sneered, I don't have much ability, but I have a big appetite. How dare you even entertain the idea of begging to marry Her Majesty the Queen? If you don't get rid of such a person, why don't you keep him for the new year? Xian Yuanyao nodded slowly, we should indeed give them an unforgettable lesson and let them experience the power of the Dongling Iron Cavalry. The obsidian army that has been raised for 2 years should be put to use now. About this rumor that has arisen in South Vietnam, someone should be secretly manipulating it. Chu Nanyi frowned slightly. Actually, before Her Majesty the Queen ascended the throne, South Vietnam had such a statement. Later, South Vietnam and Northern Xinjiang sent envoys to save it. It was also an attempt to find out what was true. However, after the Lord used a small alienation plan, Suchang aroused the murderous intent of the emperor after returning to South Vietnam. Prime Minister Su of South Vietnam had deep roots and strong influence. The emperor needed to get rid of Suchang slowly. Plan slowly to avoid civil strife in the government. I have no time to worry about it in the past 2 years. However, after such a long time, the emperor's power should have been stable, and the negative impact caused by killing Prime Minister Su should have settled down, so he had such an overestimating act of seeking death again. Mo Lingen, who was in charge of the intelligence, had vaguely mentioned such rumors in South Vietnam before. Firstly, Her Majesty the Queen had just arrived in Dongling and needed to secure her throne. Secondly, Rong Yu had no ambition to conquer the world. Thirdly, it was South Vietnam and Northern Xinjiang. The arrival of the envoys was a bit frustrating. They thought that both countries could learn to behave better. Unexpectedly, the Emperor of Nanya was like a cockroach that could not be killed. He remained ambitious. Obviously, the Emperor of Nanjiang really took the saying to conquer the world with Queen Dongling seriously, that's why he dared to test their master again and again. Bottom line. In the past, the Emperor of Southern Xinjiang was intimidated by Rong Yu's control of the regency power of Dazhu and Dongling, and he was able to restrain himself a little. Now it has been more than a year since the Emperor of Dazhu ascended the throne, and Rongyu has even taken root in Dongling, so southern Xinjiang. Does the Emperor have no scruples? Xianyu Enyao frowned slightly and pondered for a long time. Quanping Sui in the northeast of South Vietnam is adjacent to Huainan. It is an easy to attack and difficult to defend area. Therefore, my father has heavily defended Huainan since he was guarding it. South Vietnam's military strength must not be underestimated, even after so many years. No one took action, but the soldiers and horses defending Huainan never dared to slack off. If this time is to teach South Vietnam a lesson, I think we can use the Yu Kingdom to catch them off guard. As he said that, he glanced at Rongyu. I just want to practice my skills with the Black Obsidian Army. Didn't I want to watch a black cavalry drill before I go to the army? This time is just right. I will fight with real swords and guns on the battlefield. Look, I will never come back to see the Lord until I capture the 7 cities in South Vietnam. He knelt down on one knee and said, I beg you to go to war and make South Vietnam pay the price for their arrogance and ambition. If we borrow the road from Yu country, we can take over Yu country as well. Siejin said unhurriedly. Yu country has a small territory, small population, and weak military strength. When the Dongling Iron Cavalry came out, they had no chance to parry. The only thing you can do is surrender. After a pause, however, the Yu Kingdom has always been peaceful. After being adopted as the territory of Dongling, they can treat their people well. They can also infect the Yu Kingdom clan and still allow them to be vassal kings without changing the honor of the royal family. As soon as he said this, everyone else in the hall couldn't help but look at him. Xianyu Enyao frowned, thoughtfully. There is a vast plain on the southern border of Yu country where it meets South Vietnam. It is fertile with water and grass and is suitable for raising troops and horses. South Vietnam had also been eyeing the grassland of Yu country. If it could capture the border of Yu country, large-scale military garrisoning would not be a problem. However, war has always been the most sensitive matter, and the balance between countries cannot be broken easily. Even if Yu country is only a small and weak country, South Vietnam does not dare to raise troops to provoke a war without authorization, because once South Vietnam provokes a war, other countries will not maybe sit on the sidelines. The Yu Kingdom is sandwiched between South Vietnam and Tangling. Both the North and the South are powerful countries. In principle, the Yu Kingdom is not dependent on any country. However, whether it is South Vietnam or Tangling, if they really want to raise troops to conquer or use strong pressure to coerce, then Yu Guo can only pay tribute every year in order to ensure the safety of his family and country. If there is destined to be a war between the 9 countries, then the outcome of the 3 small countries of Yu country, Yan country, and Qing country has actually been doomed. If it is not broken now, it will still be impossible to find stability in the future. Nan 11's voice was calm. The news about Jean Ruo came early. We can let Mo Lingen pay attention to the situation in South Vietnam first. During this time, I can also exchange letters with Jean Ruo first to make the Awang royal family mentally prepared. Xianyu Enyao raised his eyes and his eyes fell on Her Majesty the Queen's beautiful and delicate face. He was a little surprised and asked, Your Majesty agrees with me to raise troops to attack South Vietnam. Why don't you agree? Nan 11 raised her eyebrows. Only Nanyu is allowed to provoke again and again, but Dongling is not allowed to fight back in anger. Xianyu Enyao said with a smile, Not really, I just thought Your Majesty was more peace-loving. In fact, it was because his master's fighting spirit was worn out by love, so that people had the illusion that Her Majesty was a gentle person. Fighting for hegemony seemed to belong to men by nature. With Her Majesty in power in Dongling, it seemed that this war would not be fought. Thinking of this, Xianyu Enyao suddenly shuddered. Was it because of this illusion that Nanyu and Beijiang had repeatedly provoked each other? But it was obvious that Her Majesty was just a little gentle and looked amiable, but it did not mean that she was the kind of person who could be bullied and swallow her anger. Besides, anyone who dared to bully Her Majesty would soon be taught by the master how to write the word death. Thank you, Jin Rongyu said in a cold voice. Go and prepare an invitation to invite King Yu to come to Dongling as a guest. I obey your order. Chu Nanyi, send a message to Mo Lingan immediately, asking him to focus on the movements of the Nanyu royal family. Yes. The Black Obsidian Army's mounts, weapons and armor are all equipped and ready to go to war at any time. Rongyu's tone became more and more stern. Chu Hongii will hand over the military power to Xian Yuanyao, and the 100,000 golden armored army will be temporarily under the command of Xian Yuanyao. Xian Yuanyao and Chu Hongii received the order at the same time. I obey your order. Nan 11 looked at Chu Hongii quietly. The transfer of troops and horses is actually the transfer of power. It sounds like an understatement, but for military generals, military power means the foundation of their lives. Chu Hongii cannot fail to understand this. But she did not question Rongyu's arrangement at all, and even her expression did not change at all. Nan 11 raised the corner of her lips slightly. Chu Hongii now has the power to lead the Imperial Guards and has a child. It is the best arrangement for her to stay in the palace and work. If Dongling sends troops to conquer other countries, the first general to be sent out must be Xian Yuanyao. If other countries also start to join this war in the future, then Xian Yuanqi may be more suitable than Chu Hongii. After all, Chu Hongii's military tactics and martial arts are the results of Xian Yuanqi's teaching. Or Rongyu will lead the troops himself. Chu Hongii, who has become a mother and is the most suitable general to stay by the queen's side to protect her, will probably not be arranged to go to the battlefield. Go and prepare, Rongyu said. The equipment of the Golden Armor Guard will be provided by the National Treasury. Please prepare a memorial with the amount of silver needed. After Xiejin has reviewed it, he will present it to the king for approval. Xian Yuanyao accepted the order. Yes. The king will equip you with the best weapons, war horses, and armor. Rongyu's eyes fell on Xian Yuanyao's face. I hope your record can match such standards. Xian Yuanyao suddenly felt a lot of pressure and accepted the order respectfully. I will live up to the expectations of my master. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 774. Rongyu hummed, go down and get ready. Yes, everyone saluted. I will leave. When everyone turned to leave, a squeaking sound suddenly came from the corner, and then a little guy all white in body jumped lightly and neatly, and jumped into Nan 11's arms like lightning, squeaking. Nan 11 stroked its little head. How can your master trust you to let you, well, a mink deliver the message alone? Zhizzy, he didn't come alone, he was also escorted. Okay. Nan 11 smiled softly. Are you going back? Your master asked you to come here because he plans to let you stay here permanently, right? Squeak, it won't go back. It has fallen out of favor, why go back? Nan 11 couldn't help laughing when she saw its irritable yet cute appearance. She could almost imagine that if it were a talking person, it would be angrily accusing its owner of negligence. In addition to a secret letter, Zanruo also asked him to bring a letter of greetings from home. The general content is to let the ferret stay in Dongling temporarily. It should be regarded as a birthday gift for the little prince. Prince Zanruo is very busy now. Busy telling people's fortunes, busy being a fortune teller with a celestial spirit and indifferent to fame and fortune, and had no time to feed this extremely picky mink. Ferrets are really spiritual. Nan 11 caressed its soft and smooth hair. Rongyu, does the conquest of the world begin in South Vietnam? Rongyu reached out and picked up the ferret by the neck and threw it to Yin's Huang. Take it to the prince and let him read it to the prince in the future. Yin's Huang hugged the ferret and followed the order with an expressionless face, not caring that the ferret kept squeaking in her arms. Reading companion, Nan 11 looked at Rongyu with a subtle expression. It needs to be able to read. Rongyu sat down beside her and stretched out his arms to wrap her in his arms. After all, the world cannot be peaceful for a long time. Nan 11 frowned slightly. As long as one of the 9 countries has an unquenchable ambition, war will inevitably break out, and other countries will be more or less involved in it. Rongyu said, "Don't worry, even if all parts of the world are caught in war, Dongling and Dazhu will still be the most stable and peaceful Pure Lands in the world. I will not let the war burn to Dongling and Dazhu. Whoever has the ambition will pay for it himself. If South Vietnam persists in its evil intentions, it will make South Vietnam pay the price." Rongyu Nan 11 turned her head to look at him, her brows soft and gentle. "You gave Chu Hongai's military power to Xian Yuanyao, aren't you worried about her having ideas? Army soldiers and horses belong to the country. The duty of soldiers is to protect the country and not to be owned by anyone." Rongyu said calmly, "If Chu Hongai is willing to go to the battlefield, Xian Yuanqi is also willing to let Chu Hongai go to the battlefield. I can reserve military power for her." Nan 11 chuckled. "If she is really willing to go to the battlefield for military power, then she is not Chu Hongai." "Yes." Rongyu nodded slowly. "Chu Hongai is not that kind of person, so 11er doesn't need to think too much." Nan 11 didn't think much about it, but the change of military power was not a trivial matter for a general. She was surprised that Chu Hongai reacted so calmly. The king employs loyal ministers and good generals. They can come in handy when they are needed. When they are not needed, they must behave themselves. This is the duty of a minister." Rongyu raised his hand and hooked Nan 11's hair, and the two of them joined hands. Leaning on the brocade couch, he had a rare leisurely discussion about the ways of monarchs and ministers. Similarly, what can keep ministers favored for a long time must also be their loyalty and ability. Both are indispensable. As long as the original intention remains unchanged, they will be treated badly. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 775. Besides Nan 11, there was also Xian Yuanyao, who was surprised by Chu Hongai's attitude. On the way out of the palace, Xian Yuanyao turned his head and looked at Chu Hongai's calm and indifferent expression as always. After several hesitations, he finally said, "Will my sister-in-law be unhappy?" "Not happy?" Chu Hongai frowned and looked at him in confusion. "Why are you unhappy?" "Military power." Chu Hongai was silent for a moment and asked, "Why are you unhappy?" Xian Yuanyao was silent for a moment, and had no choice but to repeat, "Military power. Since we have to prepare for the battlefield, the power of troops and horses should naturally belong to you." Chu Hongai said calmly, "Soldiers need to be trained before going to the battlefield. They need to adapt to the new coach and the coach's style of leading troops. Only in this way can we ensure that we can go to the battlefield. We achieved greater victory on the battlefield. The regent's arrangements were very appropriate, and I was not unhappy." Xian Yuanyao sighed, and for a moment he actually felt that he was judging the heart of a gentleman with the heart of a villain. Xiejin stretched out his hand and pinched his face. "Because you were the one who took over the military power, and you feel guilty, so you are worried that the crown princess will be unhappy. If you two switch positions today, the Lord will ask you to take over the military power of the Obsidian army. I believe you will not have any thoughts when handing it over to the crown princess and will only obey the will." Xian Yuanyao thought for a moment, then nodded, "That's true." Because he trusts the Lord and believes that the Lord will make the most appropriate arrangements for the war, and is not taking this opportunity to deprive anyone of their military power, there is nothing to question. As long as there is enough trust between the monarch and his ministers, all other issues are not a problem. Xian Yuanqi said before that capable and loyal ministers, regardless of whether they hold power or not, can maintain long-term prosperity. Chu Hongai's voice was calm. If the utilitarianism is too strong, sooner or later the power will come back to bite you. A powerful weapon, so whether you are serving as an official in the government or leading troops in battle, the most important thing is to maintain a peaceful mind. Only by being unfazed by favors and humiliations, and not being arrogant or impetuous, can you go far. Yao Yao, do you hear that? Xiejin smiled. Learn more from the crown princess. Her mentality is an example for us to follow. He probably understood why the Lord asked Xian Yuanqi to be the young prince's tutor. Although the man was young, he was wise enough. There is no need to flatter him. Chu Hongai's voice was light, obviously not intending to give him face. Although the Golden Armor Army is not as good as the Black Obsidian Army, it is still an elite force. Prince Yao has these two armies in hand, and he has you have to fight beautifully on the battlefield, otherwise you won't be able to afford such a high standard configuration. Xian Yuanyao was silent for a moment. I was already under a lot of pressure in the Dajhan Palace. Now when I heard Chu Hongai's unhurried words, I felt more and more that I had a heavy responsibility. Not only did I have to win the battle, but I also had to fight a beautiful victory. It was best to do it. He wiped out South Vietnam without losing a single soldier. From then on, he became famous all over the world and frightened the enemies, just like Rong Yu, the regent of the great Zhou dynasty, who is also their current master. But God knows, how many Rong Yu can be produced in 100 years. Most of them are actually just ordinary people. At best, they are a little more talented than ordinary people. They come from a better background. They have had the opportunity to practice martial arts and come into contact with military strategies since they were young. They have been taught by others, and they have a higher understanding and can afford it. Bitterness, whether it is a natural condition or acquired perseverance to endure hardships and stand hard work, it is an indispensable factor. But this does not mean that all of them are geniuses or gods of war. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 776. No matter what Xian Yuanyao thinks, or how much pressure he feels, he still has to do what he should do. Chu Hongai went to the Dongdu military camp with him to hand over the military power of the Golden Armor Army. In front of all the generals and soldiers in the army, the silver-white token was officially handed over to Xian Yuanyao. Although the Golden Armor Army soldiers were not very familiar with Xian Yuanyao, they were not unfamiliar with him. They knew that he was the son of the king of Huainan, the prince who grew up in the military camp since childhood, and he would definitely be more favored by the soldiers than the pampered prince. In addition, Xian Yuanyao was also the commander-in-chief of the Black Obsidian Army, a general entrusted with an important task by the regent. In fact, the Golden Armor Army had admired the Black Obsidian Army for a long time, and they might still have some competitive spirit in their hearts. After all, they had only heard about the strength of the Black Obsidian Army, and had not really seen it, so it was normal for them to be dissatisfied. So even if the Golden Armor Army did not reject the decision to change the commander, if they wanted them to truly respect him, they had to see Xian Yuanyao's real ability. On March 16, Xian Yuanyao went to the palace to ask for permission to hold a contest between the Obsidian Army and the Golden Armor Army in the Zidu military camp, and asked the regent to come to the camp to take charge, in order to make the Golden Armor Army soldiers convinced of the new commander, so that they can follow the arrangements without distraction when they go to the battlefield in the future, and not miss the opportunity to fight. The regent agreed. So before dawn on March 18, Xian Yuanyao transferred 5,000 Obsidian Army soldiers to the Zidu military camp, and announced in public that every tactic needed in the military camp could be challenged by the Golden Armor Army. The challenge method would be determined by the Golden Armor Army, and the challenge result would be determined by the regent. In fact, the result of winning or losing does not need to be determined by anyone. The soldiers in the army believe in true ability. As long as they are open-minded soldiers, they will naturally judge the level of ability, and it is not something that can be denied by their own stubbornness. The regent personally taking charge is a deterrent to all the soldiers. It is said that the competition on that day was very intense and particularly shocking. The elite cavalry, archery is a must-practice item. Xian Yao's obsidian army crushed all the golden armor army in archery, and beat them without any resistance. The obsidian army also has an absolute advantage in the physical strength and endurance of the army. At least it can prove that the training in the past 2 years is not a joke. It is a harsh tempering in the wind and rain, which has tempered the former elite into an indestructible Iron Man bit by bit. In the end, Xian Yao won the respect of the Golden Armor Army with his strong strength. In addition to the replacement of the military power of the Golden Armor Army, the spring examination in March also officially began. This is destined to be a busy season. Xian Yao and Xie Jin officially devoted themselves to busy work. One was responsible for the military preparations and food in the autumn in the court, and had to divide time and energy to try the cases of the Ministry of Justice. The other was immersed in the Golden Armor Army and did the final training before the troops. After the half-month holiday, the two of them rarely met again for the whole summer. Even if they met occasionally, they had to separate in a hurry. The combat effectiveness of the Jinjia army was not weak, but the adaptation period after the change of commander was necessary, and the strategic style of the new commander had to be familiar and accustomed to by the soldiers as soon as possible. Feelings were feelings, and business was business. The love between men and women seemed insignificant in the face of national affairs. Both of them were rational people who took the overall situation into consideration and knew the cruelty of war better than anyone else. One more sweat in the barracks today, and one more chance of survival on the battlefield tomorrow. Time passed quickly. In mid-May, the King of Yu was invited to Dongling, and the regent issued an order to receive him. As expected, Zhan Ruo also followed. The King of Yu was over 50 years old and had 3 princes. Zhan Ruo was the oldest, but he was not interested in the throne, so the other 2 princes competed for the throne. However, Zhan Ruo was too outstanding. No matter how childish he acted in front of Rong Yu and Nan 11, he could not deny the fact that he was an outstanding prince in Yu. So the other 2 princes were not without their guard against him, and they had secretly wanted to suppress him. Zhan Ruo had a bad temper to begin with, and how could he endure it after being provoked 3 times? So before coming to Dongling this time, he secretly arranged for someone to spread the news that whoever could get the favor of Her Majesty the Queen of Dongling would be the next King of Yu. The rumors among various countries that whoever gets the Queen of Dongling gets the world were already fierce. Once such rumors were spread, how could the 2 princes sit still? Of course, the princes of the small Yu kingdom did not dare to have too much ambition and did not dare to covet Her Majesty the Queen of Yu kingdom, but this did not mean that they did not want to be the King of Yu kingdom. Therefore, after the 2 princes of Yu kingdom learned that their father was invited to Dongling, they almost rushed to make several light and flowing robes at the fastest speed, and spent a lot of money to customize jade pendant head dresses, throwing away the ornaments of prince specifications. All the clothes and dresses were as good as they could be, just like they were going to participate in the palace selection. Zhan Ruo just sneered at this, thinking that you can only talk about inheriting the throne after you can survive Rong Yu's annoying guy. 2 idiots. So when King Yu came all the way to Dongling, Rong Yu ordered people to set up a banquet, and King Yu brought his 3 sons to the audience. The Dongling ministers looked at the princes of Yu, one more outstanding than the other, and their expressions were simply wonderful. Greetings to Her Majesty the Queen of Dongling, and to the regent. King Yu took the lead in saluting. The 3 princes behind him also followed suit. Zhan Ruo's movements were more casual, and there was a sense of perfunctory, while the 2nd and 3rd princes were respectful and calm, wearing elegant robes that made their figures look like flowing clouds and water. In addition, the appearance of the royal family of Yu was good, and the princes were young, so this scene could not help but make people think more. Fortunately, the ministers of Dongling all knew that it was the queen and the regent who took the initiative to invite King Yu to be a guest, otherwise they would have thought that King Yu was also following suit and wanted to present a beautiful boy to the queen. However, when a prince meets the emperor, he should be calm and steady. Don't you think it's inappropriate to dress like this? Rong Yu raised his eyes and saw Jean Ruo's eyes full of provocation and watching the show. He suppressed his displeasure without making a sound and said indifferently, "King Yu, please sit down." "Thank you, Queen, thank you, Regent." King Yu turned around and walked to the guest seat and sat down. His three sons sat down one by one next to him. When the second and third princes sat down, their movements were extremely elegant and calm, and they had a sense of elegance. Jean Ruo cast a meaningful look at Nan 11. Nan 11 glanced at him and turned a blind eye to the peacock-like behavior of the other two princes. "You all have come from afar, thank you for your hard work." Nan 11 smiled faintly. "I and the regent invited King Yu to come to Dongling to discuss something. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered." Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 777. King Yu had obviously guessed the reason for being invited here. He didn't have much reaction when he heard this. He only said humbly, "Her Majesty the Queen is worried about her orders. No one in the kingdom of Yu dares to refuse. South Vietnam has repeatedly provoked me, which has touched the bottom line of me and the regent." Nan 11 said calmly, "If Dongling continues to endure, it will inevitably make people think that I and the regent are weak and can be bullied." The ministers and Prince Yu who were sitting on both sides were slightly shocked. "I want to raise 60,000 troops and borrow a road from Yu Kingdom to go to South Vietnam." Nan 11 did not intend to take any detours and went straight to the point. "I hope King Yu will agree and cooperate." After the words fell, the whole hall was silent. Raise 60,000 troops? The first thought that flashed through King Yu's mind was that 60,000 soldiers and horses could teach South Vietnam a profound lesson. Nanyue is a powerful country at any rate. Even if Dongling has Rong Yu, the legendary undefeated regent, it shouldn't be too overwhelming. It only has 60,000 soldiers and horses, and it has to withstand the fatigue after a long journey, and the combat effectiveness will not be lost. Nan 11 seemed to see what he was thinking, and said with a faint smile, "Does King Yu have any doubts?" King Yu hesitated for a moment and said truthfully, "Since His Majesty intends to teach South Vietnam a lesson, then a mere 60,000 soldiers and horses can defeat South Vietnam." Minister Dongling also nodded secretly, "Yes, South Vietnam is a powerful country with at least hundreds of thousands of soldiers and horses. Even if there are not so many troops stationed at the border, if there is a real fight, 60,000 are still their opponents." "Oh, I forgot to mention it," Nan 11 added casually, "the regent sent out 60,000 cavalry, not infantry." King Yu's expression suddenly changed. 60,000 cavalry? Dongling has been diligently training his troops in the past few years. His soldiers and horses are strong and his weapons are sophisticated. They are far from the same as before I ascended the throne. Nan 11 raised her hand and picked up the teacup. "I don't mean to praise the regent for his skill in employing people, but the commander appointed by the regent is indeed very talented. 60,000 cavalry can equal 600,000 troops, which accounts for 30% of the Dongling cavalry. It is more than enough to deal with South Vietnam." After the words fell, the hall fell silent. Since today's palace banquet was discussing the dispatch of troops, both Generals Xian Yuanyao and Chu Hongii were present. Her Majesty the Queen's praise actually praised these two people. Although the strength of the Golden Armor Army was compared to that of the Black Obsidian Army that had been rigorously trained. Slightly inferior, but the combat effectiveness of cavalry has always been several times that of infantry. It is not an exaggeration to say that 60,000 cavalry can be worth 600,000. Although Chu Hongii serves as the commander beside Her Majesty the Queen, before the military talisman was handed over to Xian Yuanyao, her soldiers had not neglected their training in the past 2 years. They had powerful elite equipment and strong horses. Who could be weaker? The regent is skillful in employing people, and both generals are not idiots. In addition, they have strong economic strength, sufficient supplies of food and fodder for horses in the rear, and sharp weapons. If they do not win the battle, they will not be able to defeat the regent's well-intentioned planning. Her Majesty the Queen said today that it was a discussion, but everyone present knew in their hearts that the discussion was based on the sincerity of the other party. If Yu Guo did not cooperate, then it would not be a discussion but a notification, so the result is actually obvious. King Yu held the teacup and was silent for a moment. I dare not refuse Her Majesty the Queen's request, but once Dongling and South Vietnam go to war, Yu's country will be affected. Nan 11 said, I can guarantee that not a single soldier of Yu Kingdom will be harmed. King Yu said nothing. The king's promise is just a promise, and may not actually be fulfilled. After all, the sword has no eyes on the battlefield. Who can guarantee that innocent people will not be harmed? But now he needs such a commitment to give himself a logical reason to agree. When gods fight, little devils suffer. Yu Guo was no match for South Vietnam and Dongling, so it could only try its best to find stability between the two countries. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 778. The banquet was still going on. Nan 11 left the table halfway and the ministers saw him off respectfully. Jean Rouault stood up, brushed his wide robe sleeves, and under the unhappy gazes of the two princes, he calmly left with Nan 11 and turned to the Dajhan palace. Hauer had finished class and was sitting at the desk writing. Squeak, the snow mink was originally sitting on the shoulder of the little master. When he saw Jean Rouault coming in, he immediately shouted enthusiastically at his former master, as if he was saying hello, Squeak. Jean Rouault stretched out his hand to it, come here. The little mink turned his head away proudly, squeaked at Hauer twice, and pulled his clothes with his claws. When Hauer reached out and held it in his arms, the little guy's voice became obviously cheerful, Squeak. Jean Rouault narrowed his eyes and looked at this thing that was fickle with a bad look. Do you want me to peel your skin, betray the master so soon? It should be thrown into the pot and stewed alive. Squeak. Don't worry, the little prince touched its clean white fur, as if to comfort it. His voice was tender but cold and calm. I'm here, he doesn't dare. The little mink squeaked non-stop and kept pulling into Hauer's arms. Your Highness is mighty, Jean Rouault smiled, you are worthy of being the son of Her Majesty the Queen. Hauer looked at him calmly, you are flattering. Seeing this, Jean Rouault couldn't help but curl his lips, secretly thinking that he was still cute when he was a child. When he was ignorant and couldn't speak, he liked him more and more. Now that he has grown up and can speak, this cold and indifferent look is exactly the same as his father, not cute at all. Why is the child so mature? Even if he wants to inherit the throne, he can be a gentle and tolerant emperor like Her Majesty the Queen. Why be like his annoying father? Jean Rouault Nan 11 sat on the couch and raised her hand to invite him to sit down. I see that your two brothers are not suitable to be the next king of Yu. Jean Rouault felt a sense of crisis when he heard this. Sister wants me to be the king. Nan 11 shook her head. Wrong. Yu means that if we want to go to war with non-Yu, we must pass through Yu Kingdom. Instead of being entangled with Yu Kingdom because of the territory in the end, it is better to incorporate Yu Kingdom into the territory of Dongling now. Jean Rouault didn't say anything, frowned and thought carefully for a long time. No eggs will be broken when the nest is overturned. If the countries in the world really want to go to war, the three small countries of Yu Kingdom, Qing Kingdom, and Yan Kingdom will definitely not be able to stay out of it, and they will certainly not be opponents of the major powers, so they can only rely on or be annexed. He obviously didn't care about the ending of Yu Kingdom. Anyway, the one who annexed it in the end must be sister. Yu Kingdom was incorporated into the territory of Dongling, and the lives of the people of Yu Kingdom would not be affected much. Nan 11 nodded, indeed. Yu State is sandwiched between Nanyu and Dongling. Whether it is annexed or attached, it must choose a country. Zhanruo side. Nanyu is not as strong as Dongling, but the emperor of Nanyu is still a stupid guy who doesn't know his own weight. Yu State has no other choice. Nan 11 was silent for a moment. After being incorporated into the territory of Dongling, Yu State will completely become a minister of Dongling. The territory where Yu State is now located will become part of the territory of Dongling. It can no longer exercise royal power independently, but must obey the decrees of the Dongling court. Zhanruo said, "This is inevitable, otherwise why do those ambitious kings want to conquer the world at all costs? Isn't it just to be the common master of the world? Let all countries in the world have only one voice from now on, only one royal family, supreme and noble, no one dares to rebel. This is the greatest ambition and wish of an ambitious king. Ambition and ambition can be had by anyone, but this must be based on equal strength, otherwise it will only become cannon fodder." Squeak, the snow ferret suddenly cried out. Zhanruo turned his head and saw Hauer standing up and walking into the inner hall. A little person who had just woken up was lying on the dragon bed, opening his eyes and looking sleepy. The two brothers seemed to have a good relationship. Zhanruo raised his eyebrows and looked in the direction of the inner hall. After they grow up, there shouldn't be any quarrels between the brothers. Nan 11 said, "It shouldn't happen." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 779. The wet nurse who was looking after the little prince in the inner hall took Zhanru down. Hauer took his younger brother's hand and turned around to walk out. Zhanru, who will be 1 year old in April, was walking steadily. At this time, his brother was holding his hand. There was still a bit of confusion on his little face, as if he had just woken up. The look of deep brotherhood can finally be seen as a little bit like a child. But Zhanruo stared at Hauer's face that looked exactly like Rongyu, and the more he looked at it, the more dissatisfied he became. Little Hauer is obviously born to my sister, why does he look so much like his father? He doesn't look cute. Upon hearing this, Hauer just glanced at him expressionlessly, then took his brother's hand and walked to the desk, dragged a small stool for him to sit on, and he returned to his seat to continue writing. How does this posture look like a 3-year-old child? Zhanruo Nan 11 held her chin and said leisurely, I think you can also try to find a woman to marry and see who the child you give birth to looks like. I don't want to get married. Zhanruo's eyes fell on Zhanru's little face and he replied absent-mindedly, women like sister are very rare in the world, and those who are delicate and weak are like women who will fall down when the wind blows. I disdainful. Nan 11's eyebrows moved slightly, I have a woman here who is not so delicate. Zhanruo frowned and looked at Zhanru, who was about 1 year old. He felt that Zhanru looked very similar to Nan 11. His little face was very cute and his eyes were big like gems. He was sitting on a stool and looking at his brother. The scene when he was writing was so cute that Zhanruo couldn't help but want to kiss him. The wet nurse stood beside Zhanru, taking care of the two children responsibly. Zhanruo Nan 11 raised her eyebrows, did you hear what I said? Zhanruo turned his head and was silent for a moment, I heard before that sister likes to give people marriages. It seems to be true. If you like to give people marriage, you must be willing to do so. Nan 11 smiled, I am not a person who likes to use power to oppress others, and I don't like to force people who hate each other to become a grudge couple. Zhanruo thought for a while, I don't want to get married, but if my sister is afraid that I will be lonely, why not adopt the little prince to me? This boy looks cuter and cuter. He must have inherited my sister's temperament, which is not the same as the prince's. To be precise, it was different from Rong Yu. This discovery finally made Jeanruo feel better. Adopt genre to you, Nan 11 laughed, you have a pretty good idea. Why don't you ask Hauer if you agree? Hauer ignored him at all. Jeanruo wanted to say something else, but he caught a glimpse of the annoying person stepping into the palace gate. He frowned subconsciously, I can't stay alone with my sister for a while. Why is this person still haunting me? Although Yuguo was not a very distinguished guest, as the regent, it would not be justified in terms of etiquette to come back from the palace banquet so early. Zanruo, you have grown up, Nan 11 sighed, when you grow up, you have to learn to face reality. No matter what you think about him, right now he is in charge of the power of this country. This is something that no one can do. Denied facts cannot even be questioned. Jeanruo snorted coldly, love makes people blind, even Sister is no exception. She wholeheartedly talks to him. Although the palms and backs of your hands are full of flesh, people's hearts are always biased, Nan 11 advised, if you are willing to live in peace with Rong Yu, it means comfort and joy to me, and I will take care of you both. Otherwise, she could only prefer Rong Yu more. Jeanruo was dissatisfied, I'm still a child. Rong Yu, who stepped into the palace door, happened to hear these words, paused slightly, and then walked in calmly. Hauer got up to see his father, and the wet nurse also came over with Xiao Zhana in her arms to salute. Doing homework, Rong Yu looked at Hauer, what task did the master give you? Hauer said, back to my father, Hauer is dictating the 3-character classic. Rong Yu hummed, put your homework aside for now and take your 2 younger brothers to the side hall to play. 2 younger brothers. Hauer was silent for a moment, probably because father and son had a spiritual connection. He quickly raised his head and looked at Zanruo. This look made Jeanruo's face darken instantly, and he couldn't help but emphasize, Your Highness, you can call me uncle. You just said you were a child. Hauer's voice was soft and gentle, but did not hide the coldness. In that case, you can be my prince's younger brother. Jeanruo glared at Rong Yu fiercely, do you want face or not? If you teach your children this way, you won't be afraid of being struck by lightning. It's better than someone shamelessly calling himself a child. Rong Yu said in an indifferent tone, you still refuse to accept your age and insist on comparing yourself to children. No matter what the relationship was, at least for now, Jeanruo is 3 or 4 years older than Nan 11. Nan 11 already has 2 children, but he still dares to call himself a child. What is it if it's not shameless? Nan 11 laughed, raised her hand to call Hauer over, and gently ordered, don't take what my father told you just now seriously. You must respect Uncle Zanruo. Do you understand? Hauer nodded, yes. Jeanruo snorted coldly and looked at Rong Yu provocatively, as if to say, did you see that? My sister still loves me. Rong Yu didn't bother to pay attention to him at all. Was Nan 11 taking the opportunity to teach Hauer? She was afraid that the 3-year-old Hauer would really take his father's words seriously and have a wrong understanding of seniority. Did she really think it was to protect him? Yin's Huang, Rong Yu ordered, it's cool in the Imperial Garden. You can accompany Prince Zanruo, who has come all the way, for a stroll. Don't let him stand here and be an eyesore. Yin's Huang said expressionlessly, yes. Jeanruo glanced at the cold Yinshuang and frowned, saying, I won't go. Yinshuang is as cold as ice. What's the point of going shopping with her? I want to stay here and have lunch with my sister. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 780. Dream on. Rong Yu couldn't let him stay, Yinshuang. Yinshuang said nothing, and walked over like a moving ice cube and lifted up the collar of Jeanruo's neck. What are you doing? Jeanruo said angrily, let me go. Yinshuang ignored him, picked him up and turned to walk out. Let me go. Jean Rouault struggled in vain, and stretched out his hand to try to knock off Yin Shuang's hand. Is this how you Dongling treat guests? Don't forget that I am the prince of Yu Kingdom, you can't treat me like this. Let me go. Let me go. The childish prince was dragged out while shouting all the way. Nan 11 looked at the scene outside through the window and couldn't help laughing. These two people are cold and hot, one is calm and the other is irritable, and they seem to be quite a match. Rong Yu didn't have any ideas at first, but when he heard Nan 11's words, his eyebrows moved immediately. Good idea. Jean Rouault's annoying temper should be cured by Yin Shuang. In addition to Yin Shuang being able to control his temper, if Jean Rouault is in charge of Yu Kingdom in the future, Yin Shuang can also be his most capable assistant. Nan 11 turned her head, raised her hand to Rong Yu, held his face and kissed him. Jean Rouault will be the most suitable vassal king of Yu Kingdom. Rong Yu's eyebrows were softened by her kiss, and his nerves relaxed. He sat beside her and held Nan 11 in his arms. 11 is right, you can grant them marriage. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows. I didn't see you so active when granting marriage to other couples before. Rong Yu said, I will unconditionally follow any decision of 11 Nan 11 raised her eyebrows slightly. Are you serious? A real man's promise is important. Rong Yu is the regent of Dongling, and he can't easily make promises without fulfilling them, so he is more cautious about the things he promises. Seeing Nan 11's playful expression, Rong Yu pondered for a while and shook his head slowly. If 11 wants 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, I will never obey you. Nan 11 chuckled, no, you should obey any decision of mine unconditionally. Rong Yu directly rubbed her into his arms. 3 palaces and 6 courtyards are Hauer's welfare in the future. The couple loved each other here, and Hauer sat calmly at the desk and wrote down his thoughts. He didn't have an accurate understanding of whether it was a welfare or not. At the age of 3, Hauer could recite a complete 3-character classic, but there were too many words, so it was still difficult to write down the words. Especially for a 3-year-old child, writing down the entire chapter was almost impossible. However, the strong are naturally self-disciplined and willing to challenge themselves, especially now that they have a younger brother. They should set an example for their younger brother. Have King Yu and his 2 sons settled. Rong Yu hummed, let the Minister of Rights be responsible for the reception. The monarch of a small Yu country will soon become a minister of Dongling, so there is no need to entertain him with too high standards. Only by making him feel the absolute deterrence and the unchallengeable imperial authority of Dongling, can he get the more respectful cooperation of Yu-Gi-Oh on the way to attack Nanyu in the future, and cut off the possibility of them pulling his legs behind him. Speaking of the 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, I just remembered that the children born recently are all boys, and there is not even a girl. Nan 11 smiled. I don't know whether Qingling is pregnant with a boy or a girl. If she is lucky enough to give birth to a little girl, she will definitely be a group favorite among these boys when she grows up. If it is a boy, it will probably be worthless because there are too many boys and no one wants them. Rong Yu said, there is nothing wrong with having more boys. Train them well and they will all be Hauer's capable ministers in the future. Loyal and capable ministers can be trained from an early age. A wise ruler and powerful ministers are the foundation for the continued prosperity of the dynasty. It is not too late to choose concubines after they grow up. Author has something to say.